Just off the old Shoreham Road, on the corner of Goldstone Lane, stands the usual clutch of retail outlets, selling everything from burgers to beds. I'm standing on the spot, what would have been the penalty spot, at Brighton and Hove Albion's Goldstone Ground. 100 years ago, more than a dozen players from this team swapped the football field for the battlefield. They signed up and went off to war. Bob Pom-Pom-Whiting was an outstanding goalkeeper of his generation. He's described as one of the finest goalkeepers ever to stand guard for the Albion. His nickname came from his kicking power, which was compared to the force and range of the military pom-pom gun. After playing for West Ham and Chelsea, he was transferred to Brighton in the summer of 1908, where his career flourished for 7 seasons until the outbreak of war. The 1911 census reveals that he lived here at 138 Westbourne Street in Hove, just a few minutes' walk from the Goldstone Ground. During the first month of the Great War, like so many other professional footballers, Pom-Pom felt compelled to enlist. Peter Daniel is from Westminster Archives.
Football was heavily criticised at the beginning of the war because they didn't think that football was pulling its weight. And lots of very famous people like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle thought that the footballers were shirkers. I think that was a headline that the Times newspaper used at the time. They were compared very unfavourably with rugby players. There's a famous post at the time that said that 90% of Union players had joined up. And they had there was a sportsman's battalion, but the sportsman was kind of hunting, shooting, fishing. So there was a bit of a class divide. So football was seen as like not being patriotic, and so there were a number of people that thought that they had to try and rectify that. And there's a man called William Joynson Hicks decided to try and talk to some of the people around the Football League and try and get together a football battalion, which would be the idea that if the professionals set the example, the fans would follow.
On the 29th of August 1914, the Daily Sketch published an article in which it urged professional footballers to join the British Army.
If Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton, could not Germany be defeated on the football fields of England? It is pointed out that if the 7,000 trained athletes were to enlist and charge the Germans instead, they would be the heroes of the day. And most important of all, tens of thousands of football enthusiasts would follow their example. Names of football clubs might be immortalised as regiments.
8 months into the war, some 300 professional footballers had joined the 17th Middlesex Regiment, which was soon dubbed the Football Battalion. Pom-Pom-Whiting, alongside other members of the Brighton team, were instrumental in its foundation.
There was a large meeting at Fulham Town Hall in December 1914, where Joynson Hicks and a number of the football community got together. Pom-Pom-Whiting, a lot of the Brighton players, some of them were at that meeting, but the bulk of them, because as a big group of them, joined up in the January straight after that. They were trying to sell it on the idea that the players could keep playing for their football clubs. They could train in the week, train to be soldiers, but still turn out for their clubs at the weekend. Pom-Pom's a team man, so he joined up with everybody else because he wanted to do his bit.
After a year's infantry training, Whiting and his comrades were having their first taste of trench warfare. In December 1915, he wrote a letter to the Secretary of Brighton and Hove Albion, indicating the importance of football to both him and his fellow professionals, even when on active service on the Western Front.
We're having some exciting times in the big match out here. It's great sport to see our airmen scoring against the Allemands, hoping you will excuse that bit of French. Actually, I'm going great guns in the French language out here. Quite a genius at it. I hope this will find you and all old friends at Brighton in the best of health, as it leaves me at present. I'm looking forward to playing next season with the old club.
Jack Woodhouse, an Albion footballer serving alongside Whiting, wrote more specifically about their experiences in the trenches.
We've been in the firing line just over a week. It was an exciting experience the first day or so, to hear our big guns firing behind us and the whistling and bursting of the German shells overhead, But after the first few days, it seemed a matter of course. We've had some miserable and wet weather since we've been here, and the trenches are knee-deep in mud. But all the boys seem happy enough.
While serving in the filthy trenches, Whiting contracted scabies and was evacuated for treatment at the Eastern Military Hospital, which was based here at Basvick College on Dyke Road in Brighton. During his sick leave, he was able to spend time with his wife, Nellie. Already the mother of 2 young boys, Nellie fell pregnant, and when the time came to return to the trenches, instead of reporting for duty, Pom-Pom went absent without leave. After 133 days, the father-to-be was arrested and charged with desertion. It was reported in the Brighton Herald on the 21st of October 1916.
On Saturday, Robert Whiting, a private in the Footballers' Battalion, was remanded to await an escort. He was charged with being an absentee since June last, but pleaded not guilty. The defendant told that he'd been treated in hospital and that he was not in a fit condition to travel.
It was a serious military crime which carried the greatest punishment. Peter Daniel is from Westminster Archives.
Earlier on in the war, perhaps that could have been a death sentence, but in the context of the year when he deserted from the army, the British Army was so badly devastated by the Somme that one thing they were short of were soldiers and experienced soldiers. He was given 9 months hard labour, but because things got so desperate, they actually started to try and weed out new recruits. And so his sentence was passed right up the highest level of command. General Hubert Gough, who was involved in the Somme campaign and was now planning for, I think it was the Arras offensive. They needed to try and get some of the soldiers back. And you can see in the documents that it was Hubert Gough that signed and said that he could go back to serve in his battalion. He was demoted. He was no longer a sergeant or lance sergeant. He went down to the ranks, but he went back to take part in this particular campaign.
Whiting returned to France just in time for the bloody month-long offensive at Arras. For 3 weeks, 3,000 British guns fired 2.7 million shells onto the formidable German Hindenburg Line positions. On the 28th of April 1917, the 17th Middlesex, the football battalion, took part in an attack on German-held territory around Oppy Wood. They were virtually annihilated during the offensive. Only 1 officer and 41 men returned unscathed from the German lines. Among the 462 men killed that day was 34-year-old Private Robert Whiting. The Battle of Arras inflicted 259,000 casualties. More than 4,000 British soldiers were killed each day, an attrition rate even higher than on the Somme. Second Lieutenant Howard wrote to Nellie Whiting,
I very much regret to have to inform you that your husband, number F74, Private R. Whiting of this battalion, was killed in action on the 28th of last month. He was killed instantaneously by shell fire in the recent offensive operations. Will you please accept my sincere sympathy in your loss?
Back in Brighton, Nellie not only grieved for the loss of her husband, but was also forced to endure unfounded local speculation that Pom-Pom had been shot for desertion. Pom-Pom's nephew, Peter Burgess, explains.
After his death, vicious rumours were going round that Pom-Pom had died a coward, and these had reached Nellie, so it must have upset her, and there was even rumours going round that he had been shot by a firing squad for cowardness. Obviously, Nellie was extremely distressed by all this, and it was actually Pom-Pom's commanding officer that wrote a letter to the local newspaper saying that wasn't the case, and in actual fact, Pom-Pom had been in no man's land actually trying to help comrades who were fallen. So that letter was written, and hopefully that did give Nellie some comfort and relay those fears that and those vicious rumours that people had spread.
It was the Brighton Argus newspaper that published the letter attesting to Pom-Pom's courageous end.
Your husband lost his life while attending to the wounded under fire and died while doing his duty both well and nobly. He is buried very near the scene of the action near Vimy Ridge.
And with the lies still being repeated nearly a year after the end of the war, the Sussex Daily News published a clear statement on the 3rd of September 1919.
For some time past, a dastardly rumour has been in circulation in Brighton to the effect that Whiting was shot as a deserter in France, the real fact being that he fell gallantly in action. Fortunately, Mrs. Whiting, now living with her fatherless little ones, has in her possession official documents and letters which disprove a foul calumny on the heroic dead. They have been shown to a representative of the Sussex Daily News, which gladly opens its columns for the purpose.
Although Robert Pom-Pom-Whiting has no known grave, his death in service is commemorated on the Arras War Memorial in France, and here at the entrance to Hove Town Library. Several framed brass plaques honour the local men who fell during the First World War, and here, between the names of Whiteman and Wickham, is Whiting, Robert, killed in action 28th of April 1917.
Back in 1910, Pom-Pom was involved in, for what Brighton fans I suppose is their only major trophy, when they won the Charity Shield. It was played between the winners of the Football League and the winners of the Southern League, and for many it was seen as a way of deciding who was the best team in the country, who would be the champions of all England. So Pom-Pom lined up and was in the victorious Brighton and Hove Albion team, champions of all England. Being part of that team, you know, he's going to remain a hero for a long period of time.
To me, he's a sort of someone in the family that I sort of know, but I've never met. It's weird, you know. He seems to be an uncle that I actually knew. You know, if he came in the room tomorrow, I feel like I could chat to him. But he never did see his youngest boy, Joe. He was born after he died, so he never did see him. He went back to war, and by the time he arrived, Pom-Pom was long gone.
Your husband lost his life while attending to the wounded under fire and died while doing his duty both well and nobly.